Can you hear me now? Mega live, going live every week. Fresh. Mega live. Keep it real, wherever you are. We won't be far. See you there.
And a wonderful intro, and welcome to today's session. It is the 20th special edition for Mega LinkedIn Live. Today, extended version for 45 minutes, and with over 230 registered for today's show that either watch now or as normal when we send it out after the show. Welcome to all of you. This is an interesting day today because I extended together with Kevin the session to 45-minute panel discussion. Maybe this is a little bit of a provoking a discussion. Maybe it is a challenging discussion today. We are going to talk about, as we enhance to 2030, how will the contact center and the collection space actually look like? What is still a task for a human being? What will AI take over? And we probably have different perspectives. So we hope that all of you will walk from here with new ideas, or maybe we have provoked it and proved a little bit to you. Let me introduce today's speaker. We first have Chris Lowell from Step Change. Chris is a contact center service delivering manager at Step Change and has been closely involved in their digital transformation and the introduction of AI in the contact center. So with that perspective, there is some real experience out there. Michael McGuire is actually, I'm normally saying, my brother in the US. He has been living in the contact center space for over 30 years and today is a big part of the management in NobleBiz, and is coming in with his perspective and learnings and experience for the last 30 years and being, I think, like me, a part of where you dial with a list and a phone like this and up to today's environment. And finally, we have, of course, Aaron Khan, who is one of the great founders of the digital in the UK space. And from the digital GRA is a challenger, I would say, for the whole way of looking at collection today with a digital first approach. So welcome to today's session, 45-minute panel discussion. And myself, if you don't know me, I'm Martin, one of the co-founders of MEGA.AI together. And you will take over in a second, Kevin Steele from UK, a legend and a very well-known figure in the UK collection and finance space here. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for that, and welcome everybody. No Danish pastries today. We promised ice creams, but the drought seems to have ended in the UK, and I've rained, thankfully, for the last couple of days. Without further ado, I think what we ought to do is give all of our speakers a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more. I think Michael's on the east coast of the States today, so hopefully not too antisocial a time, just to give us his reflections. We had an event from the US and Canada a couple of weeks ago, but we can build on that. And then I'm going to give the soapbox to Chris and Aaron to talk about debt resolution and new ways of engaging with consumers as part of their intro. So Michael, over to you for a few words, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. It's interesting. Thank you guys for putting this together. I think AI obviously is an important topic, and really looking at 2030, what this looks like. I mean, if you look at the last, I would say 10 years, I wouldn't expect that we are as far along as we are today with AI. I think AI has really taken over a lot of the mundane type of communication with auto calls, robocalls, AI or IVR type solutions. So I think it's very welcomed in a lot of those spaces where it feels like you're actually talking to something that lives between a human and a robocall. And so it's catching on. I think obviously with the panel we're talking today about what it looks like in 2030, is it going to replace humans? Walked into my first call center when I was 16. Obviously at that time it was all humans. Now I'm the CRO of NobleBiz, which is a technology company. And, you know, just seeing where it's evolved in the last couple of years is pretty amazing, to where call centers now are being able to decrease their biggest cost, which is humans. And so call centers of the day, when you had 1,000 people in your call center, is probably more like 500 now. And so a lot of those mundane tasks that they were doing that I would honestly say they didn't like doing, checking account balances, resetting passwords, being able to answer simple questions now can be taken off their plate, and they can actually feel like they're evolving, and they can answer more difficult questions. So that side of the aspect, I think call center agents and call centers really appreciate that. I think what we look into is, when is it appropriate? When is AI gone too far? Meaning high risk type scenarios. You're stuck in the airport. You know, do you want to talk to an AI bot when you're not going to get home until 3 a.m? Probably not. So I think there is going to be some areas that we're going to find out. And then finally, I'll shut up. But basically, I think looking at AI and understanding where it's going to be in the next 10 years and being able to evolve what I call the political space, meaning a lot of the slow adoption is just from people politically challenging the fact that AI could put people out of work. AI is this scenario. I just don't want to be involved. And I think as that ages out, there's no reason that this doesn't continue to grow and continue to help, you know, other Americans in my case.
Okay, so we'll come back to a little later on about the risks of this type of change at the speed it's taking place, because, you know, the reality is, certainly for the Joe consumer, this seems to be happening at an alarming speed, and adoption and trust in firms, as opposed to their own usage, personal assistance of their smartphone using AI, there seems to be a disparity between the two. Chris, if I can come to you next, if you wouldn't mind, just a quick introduction, a flavor for what you've been doing and talking about, that we talked about with Vanessa yesterday, before we get into some mainstream questions.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm the implementation lead for our CEST, step change debt charity. So for those that don't know the organization, we provide free and confidential and impartial debt advice to the UK. We've been here for 33 years. We're quite a legacy organization in our industry, but we are now, with the ability of our AI tools that we've got within our enterprise platforms, able to be on the sort of the more cutting edge of the technology, which has been great to see. We've focused a lot of effort over the last sort of 12 months or so on AI on the voice channels, intent detection, which we can talk about a bit later on, and the agent assistance tools as well. Our contact center is probably quite a unique one, because we deal with a lot of highly emotional, highly complex interactions, as well as the mundane as well. So it's a really interesting topic as to the right place and time to utilize AI, and particularly for us, because we're often overwhelmed with demand, especially with the macroeconomic climate. Utilizing AI to shape and prioritize our demand has been a big win for us this year as well. So yeah, excited to talk more about that today with you guys.
Okay,
thank you.
Aaron, the soapbox is yours. I don't know where you're going to start, but here you go.
Yeah, so I think you said why debt resolution. So when we first launched, we thought and still believe that debt collection has a PR issue. So we rebranded as debt resolution with the first FCA authorized one. The reason being is that the way our CRO is, we're a mediator in a lot of ways. Often there's something wrong with a debt. If you think of a utility space, which are quite big in, there's always something wrong with a debt. And if the client's already going at the customer that they've not paid for X, Y, and Z, and then we start, you're just banging heads. So I kind of see our role and why we did debt resolution in the first place is to be like a mediator. We come along, obviously we have cutting edge technology to make it easy for customers to self-serve. But we basically tell them who we are, what we're about, what the debt relates to. And in the utility perspective, it's tell us what's wrong. We're here to help you. And I think going from that angle rather than saying you haven't paid is a lot better. And the biggest concept I can give behind that is that if you think of let's say, even a medium-term lender, probably a standard result on a collections panel is 15% out of every 100. So if you're asking everyone to pay, but the vast majority don't pay, what's the point of that? It makes people not engaged. So that's kind of why we went down the debt resolution angle and doubled down, with our recent rebrand and stuff like that.
Yeah, you've been doing a little bit out in public. I've seen you got a pair of indecent shorts on last time I spotted you. But how have you found that, going in, having direct contact with the public, asking about people's attitudes? I saw there was mixed reactions in terms of how easy it was to talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was good. You need someone like Roxy who's brilliant. Also got ADHD. She doesn't take no for an answer. She's great and just getting people talking. She came on our hike and she got people talking about something. She really cares, as do we. But it's a constant rejection. It's a bit like sales, I guess. Or maybe ex-girlfriends, I don't know. But yeah, getting people over to talk. We were quite lucky actually. The first person said yes, and had a really good conversation with Dan. And it was tricky, but yeah, the vast majority said no. What's interesting for us is that people get things so wrong. And then the funniest bit is at the end, we always go, "Do I look like a debt collector?" And they always look at you, and especially with Dan, they go, "No, no, no." And then the last one was like, "You don't sound like you're telling the truth." And she went, "Well, they're usually a brooding man with his belly hanging out." So Dan was like, "Are you saying I got my belly hanging out?" So it was good. It was a brilliant day out. We're going to do more of it. It's good to challenge views, isn't it? I think the biggest thing we always talk about is avoidance. And I was surprised by how open and honest some people were. Equally, though, there were a few people that I've never been in debt, and one of them was so annoying because she wasn't recording because he said, "Oh, I think it's a budgeting issue," and I was like, "Oh, why do you think that then?" So we're talking. I was like, "Okay, well, in this example here, Roxy, who was talked about on our page before that, she was made redundant living in London quite abruptly. That wasn't in her choice. If you get COVID and furlough," and he's like, "I never thought of it that way." And it's like there's that finger pointing. No, you see it online all the time. Oh, they're spending too much money on coffees, these Gen Zs. It's a lot of nonsense. But I think when you're challenging these views on the street, it's quite good. But yeah, we're talking to Martin about doing it in Copenhagen soon. That'll be quite cool.
Yeah, I think it's just to say that,
Martin. I think if we can come from you as a panelist now, one of the questions is, what are we getting wrong at the moment? So I'm going to start on, what are your observations coming to our market, for example, with a new proposition? What do you think so far you've seen, observed from that we could probably either do better or perhaps didn't start at the right point?
Yeah, but I think the whole interesting thing in general around going into the market is, of course, there was some expectations. I think, what will it solve? I also thought then when I went into the market that this would solve everything, and you could just start someplace where quite early find out when going live in the UK market. And I think the UK market is very interesting from everyone, from US to Germany to every place, because we found out again that where did it work really? It worked really well. Actually, also what Aaron is coming in around and saying, how could you use this for some positive engagement? Of course, we started up with, as Michael said, taking all the easy task and ID&V process. People want to pay, people want to set up a payment plan, all those things. But the interesting thing and the learnings come out of what you actually do in the UK. You have something, Michael, and I don't think you heard a lot about it. Of course, you heard about the word vulnerabilities, of course, but that's a big thing in UK where you actually register yourself and you have to handle vulnerable clients, which I love. Not that they are vulnerable, but I love the concept of if you understand their vulnerabilities before you call them, and if you then have tailoring your message. And then we found out that those people would love to be called early with an AI voice because they were stressed already. There was a reason for they were vulnerable. So to do those early engagement where it's a combination of knowledge that you have in the UK about your citizens if they are vulnerable and the situation around them. There's some tools over there that you can use to give people maybe the reason for pick up the phone to talk with you. That comes down to that positive environment actually to look at it. I'm not saying every debt collection agency does that in the UK, but Aaron for sure does. And I think, and also with an organization like you, Chris, with Step Change, that's not something we have here in Denmark, where you have those advice organs to help you and secure that you are going on a better path. So with those tools, AI and MySpace were easier to jump into because it fits in together with the narrative that I don't think a lot of people in depth want to speak about it with a human in many cases, because it's so. There was a lot of learning, Kevin, that we have brought from the UK market now. We have launched those. How do you do an affordability check? Yeah, but why is that important? That's important because if you want to have people to pay a payment plan, can they really afford it? Otherwise, you have a bad experience. You're pushing people down in a line of saying yes to things, and then after that, have to break it again. And by that, standing in a even worse situation, probably even less situation where you want to engage. So all those tools, I took a lot of those learning from the UK, a lot of motivation, Kevin, from there, and brought it to Germany, to Canada, to US in our product. So I see it there. So it was a long journey where you thought you could solve everything, but you had to start another place.
So I'm going to stay on that point, Michael, just from your perspective in the US, in terms of things that people got wrong potentially, particularly around AI governance. Do you feel there's been an issue where AI adoption happened with employees starting to use tools like Copilot, ChatGPT without any oversight, and that we started off on the wrong footing and almost have to do some corrective action before we get everybody in the same direction, and also take an account of a consumer's own usage of AI and adapting to that? Because it feels to me some organizations are having to take a backward step in order to go forwards because they don't have control over how they've deployed AI in the first place.
Yeah, I think it would have probably, if you started it over, it would have started with some type of PR campaign, because it came at a different angle. It came at an angle of businesses saying, this is how I can reduce cost, right? We don't want to hear that as consumers. So I'm glad, but the way that it came is it really came from the business market in this use case of saying, hey, we can reduce costs. We don't have to have as much labor. You know, consumers thinking, well, that's jobs. That's so on and so forth. We need more data centers. Right now in the US, the big thing is you don't want a data center next door. You don't want this huge data center eating up all your water, taking up all these resources. So now they're fighting this battle of this PR campaign of, you might use AI every day in your life, but you don't want your business to, you don't want that brand to use it. So that PR piece, I think you're right, got off to a terrible start, to where now they're having to look at very specific use cases and saying, hey, how can I adopt AI to where people will use it? If they don't use it, it doesn't matter, but it's not as threatening, and it's not replacing people's income, and it's not going to put people on the street or build a data center right next to their housing development. And so some of that is very negative. Now, on the other side, one thing that Aaron was talking about is, I think in collections or anything that's negative, you want people communicating early, right? So I've been on the other side of it, to where I've been in debt. And when you're somebody that is in debt, you are basically juggling. And you're saying, I can pay this, but I can't pay that. I can pay this, but I can't pay that. And to a company, you're just not communicating. So then things get worse. Then they start looking at going after your paycheck. Then they start looking at getting judgments. And they do that from the lack of communication, to where if you would have communicated earlier when it's small, and you would have said, hey, I can't afford 15%, but I can afford 5%. And I will make that payment every single week, or instead of monthly, I'll do weekly payments. And that early communication chain where you can get people communicating solves a lot of that problem of the big things that are going to happen if you don't. The other piece that I think is highly important in the US is brand. There's so many options. So if you go out and get a credit card, you go out and do this, you have 100 options. So if you're a brand and you do something negative, or you all of a sudden embrace this AI when the timing and the PR is not right, you could destroy your brand pretty quickly. Yeah. And so I think that's super important is how do you come at AI in a way that's helpful? You're only helping the consumer if this preferred method of communication model, if they prefer this method, then allow them to go down that. Don't force them. You know, you look at brands like Sony that has no call center. They have zero call center. If you communicate with some of these big brands, it's email or it's AI.
So you get a lot of develop that thinking. I'm going to come back to Chris now, because there's not just about AI, but digital transformation, and we'll come on to Aaron after that. Chris, you're now around about 89% engaged in their debt advice session digitally to start off with, and you have an impressive sort of 78% that complete it digitally. But that's transitioned over several years, and you're now obviously changing the IVR and other elements to embed AI. So from a brand protection as the UK's leading debt charity, what thinking has gone into that in terms of that digital first, you don't leave anybody behind type approach? So I'd just appreciate your thoughts around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the full strapline from our 2030 strategy is digital first, data-led digital first, backed by experts, and the backed by experts is absolutely crucial there. So yeah, you're right. Our sort of debt advice completion rates online are really high. You know, fluctuate between 80 and 90%. But that team still take about 5,000, 6,000 calls per month. So the client may start the journey online, but there's points within that journey where they do want to interact with one of our experts, and that's absolutely critical to, one, provide the client the choice to do that, going back to the point you made, Michael, about Sony. So at any point, if a client wants to speak to a human, they should be able to do that, but in the most efficient and frictionless way possible. So yeah, we've really thought about client choice being absolutely critical to us, although within the overarching goal of being digital first. So we think that's the easiest way to start your interaction around debt, because there's a lot of stigma out there, and I think we've made a point a couple of times on this call already that first interaction might be better without speaking to a human. People may prefer to engage digitally, and then when they're in the swing of it and they need a bit of help, it's less of a barrier to talk to somebody about it. So yeah, to summarize, client choice being absolutely key, but utilizing the technology to make that interaction as smooth and as frictionless as possible.
So Aaron, on your model, you started very much digital first and you've got human in the loop. What have you learned over the course of time where you've given that sort of ease of engagement, full capacity on your smartphone to engage through all the tools on it? Has there been a rebalancing over time that you've seen around how you engage with customers and when they do genuinely want to speak to a human, to the point where, I think Martin put in it here, where humans will never be replaced? So in terms of your thinking, where does that fit in?
Yeah, so yeah, obviously we were digital first to start with. Even now, though, it's still only 2%, maybe 3% of calls, tiny numbers. We didn't have letters at the start either, but we recognised that actually we tried to cover, we do cover every angle. Soon we'll even have the AI agent through Martin. For us, it's like, obviously we're in a privileged position that the technology we have, we've been doing it for 5 years, it's only got better. So the biggest thing for us is avoidance, is a message. We're very big on getting the first message right. So when a client passes us stuff, we're like, please don't, obviously in the notification of assignment, don't say things like escalation and all that, because it's not helpful. It's an attention economics problem as well. If you think about it, like most customers will have more than one debt. So we're like, when you're introduces digital DRA, we will have more options than them 99% of the time. Also, we're experts at sorting out debt, they are at lending or giving utilities or whatever. So the first message from them is really clear, because it teases up well. And then with us, the first message is really soft. Like we introduced a neurodiverse, for people like me with ADHD, don't like big blocks of text. So we introduced this as part of ISO 22458, the inclusivity design. So like for neurodiverse people, we don't like big blocks of text.
Can you remind me who did that with you?
I think it was this guy called Kevin. You might know him.
You had to, Kevin.
Yeah, he likes inappropriately short shorts. It's a bit weird. But yeah, having that, the initial start, he basically says what we will do, what we won't do, we'll be in touch. When we first rolled it out, obviously we get quite a lot of cases. We always do like pilots on each. Getting the first bit was like, oh, they're not responding, but we're asking them to respond. And that one was doing better. But in the end, we got more engagement, more performance, more accounts resolved. So the technology is massive. I think going back to your initial point of have we changed much, I wouldn't say so. I think we've just doubled down on the brand. Like the message that we have is really important, and how we say things. I think Step Change was saying about if you get that message wrong at the start, the customer's taken, especially in our space, they're taking a lot of effort and bravery a lot of times to try and engage. If you get that message wrong, that's it. They won't engage with you again. So we're really big on getting it right, making it as pain-free as possible. We try to get every outcome available in 3 to 5 clicks, but equally, we'll meet people where they're at. If they don't want to log in, fine, they can speak to us on any channel we want. If they want to call, we'll speak to them. If they've made an effort to reach out to us, the first thing we ask before they have a query is, how do you prefer to be contacted? Is it phone, email, letter, whatever? And if it's by obviously phone, what time? So we're trying to be, proactive and helpful as much as we can.
So a question for you, Martin, before I come to Michael. We work with a number of global firms, and in particular, the approach to outbound is beginning to change in different markets, but regulation has a role to play in that. So I'm particularly keen to hear from Michael in a minute, but where do you see that going, Martin, in due course, in terms of what is the role of outbound in its traditional sense, but any form of outbound communication, try and get people to engage? Where do you see AI fitting into that, and what do you see the direction of travel, overlaid with the fact that some of the regs vary dramatically from territory to territory?
Yeah, and outbound is my old world. I normally say I'm not good at a lot, but I'm really good at outbound because I did it with humans for 25 years, and I have a lot of respect for humans in outbound. But I think robo-dialing, as Michael said, that's more or less done. And I think it's not about the voice that's calling out and somebody have a better voice or another voice or whatever. It's about the purpose. How do you get people to want to communicate with it? So what we are doing normally when I see outbound, and I think that's especially in this situation, is all about that positive engagement, because Michael, you will probably also say pickup rates in the US and in Europe or something have a tendency to go down. Then I know Noblebiz have a tendency to get it up again. But in that space, why are people not picking up the phone? Because they have all these calls coming in. So for me, it's about that engagement in outbound, where we in example, send an SMS in the morning and saying, hey, we will be calling you later today. This is not about, to what Aaron said, this is not an enforcement call. This is a supportive call. And if you start that with understanding your client, I'm normally saying to the utility clients, why don't you give them a I love you call when you become a customer, to actually understand their financial situation? If I got a call like that from my utility company, I would be like, okay, that's not normal. So there is something there where you can say, could you engage with them very early when they become a customer, that then lead down to when they come into a collection situation, that they already know it. I just want to reflect a little bit about the whole branding, because that's actually how our clients get success with it, is with outbound also. If you say it up front with an SMS, or if you put it into your letter, or what me and Aaron have talked about, if you do a brand around it, this is your AI assistant, voice, chat, whatever it is. It has a brand, it's a part of our team, it's not judgmental. The task for that is here to help and serve you. So I think that outbound campaign where you call up with an offer and saying, hey, a good example, then I will shut up and read Michael and saying, good example is in UK, dear client, we want to call you later today. Before we do that, you can fill in a link here with an income and expense. In the end of that, you will also see if you could get access to some unclaimed benefit or some other benefits around you. That's a positive message for me. And we proved that, Kevin, with a big poll of leads in a council in UK, where they said, this is uncontactable customers, they said. I said, that's rubbish. That's not a word. That's because you do the same thing with them. And we send out a little postcard with a bot standing in the corner saying, we'll be calling you within the next couple of days to support you. And then we send an SMS, and then we called, and then the connection rate went up to 42% because people looked forward to that call. And I think that is extra crucial in a collection space, because you are stressed, you are frustrated, you're standing in a rough situation. So if I reach out to help you with that situation and we're not judgmental, that's where I think the outbound calls get extremely positive, and we can see that. But also down to Chris and saying there need to be, when they show vulnerabilities, when they say things that are other things, where it will be now is a good judgmental to say, I think this communication should continue with a human advisor, or I think you should have a link into a self-service portal where you have other options. So I think the whole narrative of togetherness around those channels are important, but outbound I did not see it successful if you don't do that engagement and brand building around it before you start calling.
So, Michael, just reconfirming sort of the context of the question. I think in the States, the automated call management has got mixed up with some of the AI regulations. Do you still see that is a challenge in terms of good AI use cases and practices around engagement strategies, that some of the existing regs are getting in the way of progress?
Yeah, so outbound in the US has a huge challenge right now. Basically, the past 20 years has been the Wild Wild West. You really have been able to dial as aggressive as you want, to reach out to consumers as often as you want. And obviously, with the US being a huge opportunity, there's been a lot of scam, a lot of other things that's came up in the outbound piece of doing business. So now we're in the phase of overregulation. We're in the phase of we did a terrible job in the industry to really self-regulate. So the government and the carriers are coming in to regulate this for everybody. And I'll give you some examples. Now in the outbound world, if you just want to use an outbound campaign, you could talk humans, you can talk AI, so on and so forth. It's going to be a challenge to get a hold of that consumer with calls being labeled as spam or scam. If you're dialing too often, with carriers blocking, just straight out blocking calls that look like a certain pattern of like a robocall. So there is a learning curve when it comes to outbound and how you can do that effectively. Now, it doesn't mean outbound's dead. It just means you have to change your behavior of reaching out to consumers. And so Martin talked about SMS. SMS is obviously an important channel in the outbound cadence that you can utilize to get somebody to pick up your call. The challenge with just using SMS is a lot of times it takes that phone call to negotiate. And so you're trying to get somebody to that phone call. The idea is how do you use things like SMS, AI, other solutions to get that person to that call? And right now it's a challenging opposition with the government, with the FCC, saying, hey, we don't want our consumers to be harassed. You know, in the US, collections has what they call a 7-in-7 rule, meaning you can only make 7 contacts in 7 days. Contacts. That could be an email, could be an SMS, could be a phone call. So especially in the Reg F and the 7-in-7, you have to strategize your outreach now. Because if you decide you're going to load up a third-party consumer list and you're going to blast out on a predictive dialer and try to get a hold of consumers, those days are gone. Those days you will be blocked, you will be labeled as scam, and nobody's going to pick up your phone. So omni-channel, we've used that buzzword forever, is here. The way you have to communicate with your consumers has changed. And the organizations that are adopting to that is starting to see that outbound come back alive. The others are just bouncing their head against the wall, expecting a different result, and it's costing them a lot of time. Some of them are going out of business. And so I've never seen it where the consumer now is really at the front, where before it was always the business. It was always business rules. It was always, we're going to make this more difficult for our businesses to operate. That's changed. And, you know, I always use the rule, if you reach out to this consumer, are they more or less likely to pick up the call? If they're more likely to pick up the call, you don't have an issue. You can use branding. You can use a lot of these tools that's going to allow you to be able to get to that consumer. But a lot of times in the collection space specifically, they're dodging your call. And so you have to get creative.
So can I pick up on that? And I'm going to bring the other guys back in on this. And then we're going to get onto horizon scanning. So Aaron, in your space, you do collection, first party and third party for utilities. So here's the scenario. We've got a debt relief scheme that's likely to get approved by the 2nd of September. They've got to give £500 million back to about $250,000 people. Chris has seen £99 million worth of debt, energy debt, come in, I think, from Vanessa's figures and white paper into step change books. We've got to find a way of communicating with these clients proactively that they're entitled to get some debt written off. Fairly unique situation. And that many of these people entitled to go on the priority service register and to social tariffs. How are you strategizing around that, where you've got a positive message to get across, but you've got to get the client to engage first of all? How do you see some of the things that Michael's just flagged there as part of your challenge when you're offering specialist services to people that historically have kept their tin hat on and kept their head underneath the table?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like, my mom's on the PSR, so if I ask her about stuff, she's always, been on benefits all her life, always been sick. So it's interesting if I ask her about her opinion on stuff, and obviously I grew up around a lot of debt. You see why people have the same opinion, and I think two of the most distrusted industries are debt collection and utilities. Utilities more so because there's constantly stuff in the news about, oh, the price cap's gone up, but look at all this money they make, and naturally it's often an outside part of their business that's making the money. If you look at a lot of the clients we work with, they do genuinely really care, and they're trying to do everything they can to get. They want to give out grants, they want to do more. And someone we don't work with, what was interesting, what they found, because they said every year they're writing off debt for vulnerable customers, but then it comes around again, same behaviour, nothing's changed. And what was interesting, because her background was social care, and I thought we learned it at our round table. It was really interesting. She said, well, this time we were like, well, what can you put in towards it? And we're going to match it, and ultimately we'll write off. But they said that the next year when it came round, customers' debt had gone down from the same people. And how I understood it, and kind of how she explained it as well, is that everyone wants to be like the superhero in their own life, and being in debt is crap. Like, it's not nice. I've been in debt. It feels out of control. You're spiraling, and just writing off someone's debt when you are struggling financially, guess what? It's going to come round again the year later. So they found that by having them putting in something what they could, they saw that the debt actually went down. So that was quite interesting. But it's because people want to feel like they're in control of their life, even if it is a nominal amount. Back to your original question, we're challenged on that. So obviously we do a lot of white label utility solutions, not just DRA. And it comes down to the flexibility. So obviously we send letters, we do text, emails, everything's two-way. We try our best to make it easily understandable. I think the reading age, Kevin, is 9, right, in the UK. What does it all mean? We're trying to get the message across. And I think doing things like what we are doing now, which we're going to be doing something with Eon Next soon as well, is changing the narrative around what we do, because people are distrusting. So even, the company just mentioned, they said when they reach out to people, look, we've got these grants and all, and they still get ignored. They're still getting, and obviously Ofgem's challenging them to get more people signed up to PSR and various other things. But there's still a lot of distrust. It's quite difficult. I think it only changes by getting out in the public. We're going to do one in Nottingham soon where we're going to be getting people to come in. And I've heard it'll be challenging. People will be giving us a lot of stick, but I quite like it. It's quite good to challenge it. I don't see I've never saw ourselves as debt collectors. I really don't.
We're short of time now, so I'm going to bring Chris in on a reflection where you're seeing this the other side. You see an awful lot of energy and water, local authority debt come through when people present for debt advice. So before we look at horizon scanning, just quick 30 seconds on what you're seeing and what you think we could possibly do differently around this at the moment in terms of changing consumer attitudes and where AI may fit into that.
Yeah, certainly. I think a big thing for us as a brand, trust central to what we do. So we have done, and we're keen to partner with organisations to lend that trust and help engage with clients that could be accessing this support that's there. The funds that are there. Promoting the work we do with campaigning down in Westminster as well. That builds a profile that hopefully people can buy into. And if we're partnering with these organisations, and then through the digital channels, we've expanded our WhatsApp estate, for example, this year. That's finding a lot of engagement there. So just utilizing the modern channels, utilizing the sort of comprehensive data profile we have on clients, so different demographics, what's the best communication method for different segments of that as well, and AI can help with the analysis of that as well as the delivery.
I think you're now promoting, I saw in your half-year figures, the amount of income optimization you're doing and where you're finding benefits on behalf of people who probably didn't know they were available before.
Absolutely, and that's key to our sort of journey over the next few years, is using AI for the next best action, and sort of at scale and at speed, being able to assess those wider benefits that are available and make it really easy for the client to understand and access those as well. So I think that's where I see it playing a main role.
So we now come on to the main event, which is really where are we going to be in 2030? So I'm going to give Martin an opportunity. 1 minute, Martin, where you see direction of travel and what you see, really emerging at the speed that Michael talked about, and what you see will be a constant throughout that.
But I think it is changing a lot of things, and I think I had a meeting with a big client the other day, and I said, "What do I need?" I had here a couple of thousand people in South Africa or Pakistan or some other country sitting there, and then saying they were not specialists. They actually reminded me of my call center people back then. There, people who have a churn of 6 months, etc., etc. So I think some of those assignments will not be there anymore. I think the quality of staff will still be there. I think in 2030 there is still a big need for humans in these edge cases that we talk about here today. Also, like vulnerable client who had an extra support need, wants to have that. But I think it's a mixture. So it's about adding another channel. That's what AI is for me. Of course, it will take more and more over. There is no need for a different kind of ID&V process. If you want to pay, if you want to set up payment plans, if you want to go to an affordability check, with all the other things around it that support the human agents, etc. So I think the voice part will move very fast. In my world, I can see that. But I think still that it's about having maybe those employees, and that was why I started building Mega back then. You have to get those employees that love their job, that doesn't leave after 6 months, that have a skill set, a human skill set of communicating difficult situations. I still think there's a huge need for that. A lot of the other things I don't believe. And I think what Chris has mentioned also, what is the best next choice for the client? So there's a lot of analytic part to route the client in the right direction. But from my perspective, in my world, I think a lot of these like big call center operation with low skilled services.
Time up on that one. I'm going to throw Michael a bit of a curveball here. So I'd like Michael's view, particularly from a US angle. What do you see with the rise of personal assistants, AI personal assistants? How do you see that change in the landscape?
I think basically the idea of having a personal assistant in a business world is amazing, right? It allows you to do all the things that take up your time, right? Even if we're going to schedule this call, AI could do this. It could reach out to Aaron and Chris and Martin and Kevin, and we could do this where it would take a human 3 or 4 hours. I think looking at where AI is going to be, I think it's going to be a choice to the consumer. The consumer is going to say, I'm willing to pay for more of a hand-holding concierge, or I think the rest of it's going to be automated. I really do. I've seen AI get very smart in a very short period of time. So I think brands will make a decision of we're going to automate everything, and this is the path the consumer will go down, or it's going to be a pay-to-play. Meaning if you prefer more of a brand that's going to hold your hand, is going to have a U.S. agent attached to a phone call, then you're going to pay for that. Yes. And that's going to be the choice that you're going to make. It's almost like insurance in the U.S. versus a public option, right? People pay the insurance because they feel like they get a better product. Where if it was a public option, they feel like everybody uses that. So I think by 2030, that will be in full scale to where brands will make a decision. We're automating everything. Like Frontier, like American, and like all these airlines are saying, we don't have a call center. I mean, Frontier came out and they closed their call center. And so your only option is this path. And I think it'll be the ones that say, I will pay for this. They'll have that option where I think the majority of people, it's going to be automated.
Chris, you come at it from obviously the step change view of life. Where do you see things heading, and what do you think that delicate balance is where you're often having to deal with bad finfluence or advice before your agent actually tells them the reality of the options available?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're definitely going to see a higher concentration of complexity coming through to the contact center as we automate more and more. And I think with that, the traditional advisor role will change significantly and become more of a highly specialized relationship management sort of role where they're dealing with that complexity. I think as well, they will be assisted, they already are today, but it should improve over time with the AI assistance. So, you know, when we're talking multi-jurisdictional and financial advice, that's obviously to sort of hand feed the advisor, so to speak, the technical detail and allow the advisor to build the trust with the client's going to be absolutely key, because at the end of the day, it's going to be more of looking at journey outcomes rather than individual interactions at that point as well, because you should have that full sort of integrated view of the client, and AI plus humans definitely at the center of that.
Aaron, you've got 1 minute. We're slightly overrunning, but I'm sure this is going to be prophetic, so I'm waiting to hear this final debt resolution message.
Yeah, well, I was sure you're going to ask about that Mills review, which was, I'm sure you've loved reading that. I think that FCA review is where they think AI is going to be helping everyone do everything. I agree with that, but I also think that's a problem, because I think the issue with too much AI is that we stop thinking. And I find myself even now, I'm like, you need to start thinking and doing. You can do something, but if you don't know how to do it, it becomes a bit pointless, if you get what I mean. And I think that's kind of my concern, because whilst I agree a lot of the things will be automated, I think in the end, I think a lot of customer experience will be worse as a result. If you've got a complaint, or if you're a vulnerable customer, I don't think people would like a bot in that aspect, because you want to be seen and heard. And if you know it's a bot, it's not quite the same as having contact really important with people. So I think, things will be automated, but ultimately I think they'll be scaled back a little bit. The other worry is that I think, if we're just using too much AI for everything, it stops a lot of our accountability and ownership, because you can get an answer so quick now, but what are you doing with it? There's so much AI out there, it's impossible to know what's good anymore.
Well, I think a final note then, Martin, I think off that, the Mills review is also warning that, you know, there may be a dumbing down here where personal assistants are actually overstepping the mark and consumers are abdicating ultimately their responsibility, which to me still remains a risk, I think, and looking at where we go to in 2030. So any final comments and forward-looking, Martin? We've got a few events coming up.
Yeah, no, I just want to say also that again, there's a strong belief from everybody. I think there's a need for humans. There's just a need for more skilled humans that live in that industry, that live in different kind of work tasks, and there is a need for a lot of automation that will happen, and that's a good thing actually for the humans if you do it correctly. I think this was a very valuable discussion, very good points from everybody. I think we actually mainly see the picture the same way. We have a huge event coming up, a couple of Kevin here in September in Stratford, where we have a full house of AI in real life as second round, and you are hosting one also, Kevin, that I am actually also joining. Maybe a few one. Let me say goodbye.
15th of October, British Standards Institute, Milton Keynes. Fabulous speakers at the moment, great audience from across the sector. Step changer speaking, Chris. Please didn't give too much of it away today. That's great. But yeah, we'll put the links in. Recording will be available immediately. Really appreciate Michael, Aaron, and Chris supporting us today. Apologies to the audience for being 3 minutes over, but thank you everybody for your attention today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the day, a great Friday, and a great weekend coming up to everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.